Altered Carbon by Richard K. Morgan. 2 hours before dawn, I sat in the peeling kitchen and smoked one of Sarah's cigarettes, listening to the maelstrom and waiting. The mill sport had long since put itself to bed, but out in the reach, currents were still snagging in the shoals, and the sound came ashore to prowl the empty streets. There was a fine mist drifting in from the whirlpool, falling on the city like sheets of muslin and fogging the kitchen windows. Chemically alert, I inventoried the hardware on the scarred wooden table for the 50th time that night. Sarah's heckler and Kotschard pistol glinted dully at me in the low light, the butt gaping open for its clip. It was an assassin's weapon, compact and utterly silenced. The magazines lay next to it. She had wrapped insulating tape around each one to distinguish the ammunition. Green for sleep, black for the spider venom load. Most of the clips were black-wrapped. Sarah had used up a lot of the green on the security guards the Gemini Boise's last night. My own contributions were less subtle. Big silver Smith & Wesson and the 4 remaining hallucinogen grenades. The thin crimson line around each canister seemed to sparkle slightly, as if it was about to detach itself from the metal casing and float up to join the curlicues of smoke riveting off my cigarette. Shift and slide of altered significance, the side effect of the tetrameth I had scored that afternoon down at the wharf. I don't usually smoke when I'm straight, but for some reason the tet always triggers the urge. Against the distant roar of the maelstrom I heard it, the hurrying stroke of rotor blades on the fabric of the night. I stubbed out my cigarette mildly unimpressed with myself and went through to the bedroom. Sarah was sleeping. An assembly of low-frequency sine curves beneath a single sheet. A raven sweep of hair covered her face. One long-fingered hand trailed over the side of the bed. As I stood looking at her, the night outside split. One of Harlan World's orbital guardians test firing into the reach. Thunder from the concussed sky rolled in to rattle the windows. The woman in the bed stirred and swept the hair out of her eyes. The liquid crystal gaze found me and locked on. "What are you looking at?" Voice husky from the residue of sleep. Smiled a little. "Don't give me that shit. Tell me what you're looking at." "Just looking. It's time to go." She lifted her head, picked up the sound of the helicopter. The sleep slid away from her face, and she sat up in bed. "Where's the where?" It was a core joke. I smiled the way you do when you see an old friend and pointed to the case in the corner of the room. "Get my gun for me." "Yes, ma'am. Black or green?" "Black. I trust these scumbags about as far as a cling film condom." In the kitchen, I loaded up the shard pistol, cast a glance at my own weapon, left it lying there. Instead, I scooped one of the H grenades, took it back in my other hand. I paused in the doorway to the bedroom, weighed the 2 pieces of hardware in each palm as if trying to decide which was the heavier. "Little something with your phallic substitute, ma'am?" Sarah looked up from beneath the hanging sickle of black hair over her forehead. She was in the midst of pulling a pair of long woolen socks up over the sheen of her thighs. "Yours is the one with the long barrel top. Size isn't—" We both heard it at the same time, a metallic double clack from the corridor outside. Our eyes met across the room, and for a quarter of a second I saw my own shock mirrored there. Then I was tossing the loaded shard gun at her. She put up one long-fingered hand and took it out of the air just as the whole bedroom wall caved in thunder. The blast knocked me back into a corner and onto the floor. They must have located us in the apartment with body heat sensors, then mined the whole wall with limpets. Taking no chances this time, the commando who came through the ruined wall was stocky and insect-eyed in full gas attack rig, hefting a snub-barreled Kalashnikov in his gloved hands. Ears ringing still on the floor, I flung the H-grenade up at him. It was uninfused, useless in any case against the gas mask, but he didn't have time to identify the device as it spun at him. Batted off the breech of his Kalashnikov and stumbled back, eyes wide behind the pane of glass of the mask. "Fire in the hole!" Sarah was down on the floor beside the bed, arms wrapped around her head and sheltered from the blast. She heard the shout, and in the seconds the bluff had bought us, she popped up again, shard gun outflung. Beyond the wall, I could see figures huddled against the expected grenade blast. I heard the mosquito whine of monomolecular splinters across the room as she put 3 shots into the lead commando. They shredded invisibly through the attack suit into the flesh beneath. It made a noise like someone straining to lift something heavy as the spider venom sank its claws into his nervous system. I grinned and started to get up. Sarah was turning her aim on figures beyond the wall when the second commando of the night appeared braced in the kitchen doorway and hosed her away with his assault rifle. Still on my knees, I watched her die with chemical clarity. It all went so slowly. It was like a video playback on frame advance. Commando kept his aim low, holding the Kalashnikov down against the hyper-rapid-fire recoil it was famous for. Bed went first, erupting into gouts of white goose down and ripped cloth. Then Sarah. Caught in the storm as she turned, I saw one leg turn to pulp below the knee. Then the body hits. Bloody fistfuls of tissue torn out of pale flanks as she fell through the curtain of fire. I reeled to my feet as the assault rifle stammered to a halt. Sarah had rolled over on her face, as if to hide the damage the shells had done to her, but I saw it, all through veils of red anyway. I came out the corner without conscious thought, and the commando was too late to bring the Kalashnikov around. I slammed into him at waist height, blocked the gun, and knocked him back into the kitchen. The barrel of the rifle caught on the door jamb, and he lost his grip. I heard the weapon clatter to the ground behind me as we hit the kitchen floor, and with the speed and strength of the tetramet, I scrambled to stride him, batted aside on flailing arm, and seized his head in both hands. Then I smashed it against the tiles like a coconut. Under the mask, his eyes went suddenly unfocused. I lifted the head again and smashed it down, feeling the skull give soggily impact. I ground down against the crunch, lifted, and smashed again. There was a roaring in my ears like the maelstrom, and somewhere I could hear my own voice screaming obscenities. I was going for a 4th or 5th blow when something kicked me between the shoulder blades and splinters jumped magically out of the table leg in front of me. I felt the sting as 2 of them found home in my face. For some reason, the rage puddled abruptly out of me. I let go of the commando's head and almost gently. I was lifted, one puzzled hand to the pain of splinters in my cheek when I realized I'd been shot, and that the bullet must have torn all the way through my chest into the table leg. I looked down dumbfounded and saw the dark red stain inking its way out over my shirt. No doubt about it. An exit hole big enough to take a golf ball. With the realization came the pain. It felt as if someone had run steel wool pipe cleaner briskly through my chest cavity. Almost thoughtfully I reached up and found the hole, plugged it with my 2 middle fingers. The fingertips scraped over the roughness of torn bone in the wound. Felt something membranous throb against one of them. The bullet had missed my heart. I grunted and attempted to rise, but the grunt turned into a cough and I tasted blood on my tongue. "Don't you move, motherfucker." The yell came out of a young throat, badly distorted with shock. I hunched forward over my wound and looked back over my shoulder. Behind me, in the doorway, a young man in a police uniform had both hands clasped around a pistol he had just shot me with. It was trembling visibly. I coughed again and turned back to the table. The Smith & Wesson was on eye level, gleaming silver, still where I had left it less than 2 minutes ago. Perhaps it was that. The scant shavings of time that had been planed off since Sarah was alive and all was well that drove me. Less than 2 minutes ago, I could have picked up the gun. I'd even thought about it. So why not now? I gritted my teeth and pressed my fingers harder into the hole in my chest and staggered upright. Blood splattered warmly against the back of my throat. I braced myself on the edge of the table with my free hand and looked back at the cop. I could feel my lips peeling back from my clenched teeth in something that was more of a grin than a grimace. "Don't make me do it, Kovac." I got myself a step closer to the table, leaned against it with my thighs, breath whistling through my teeth and bubbling in my throat. The Smith & Wesson gleamed like fool's gold on scarred wood. Out in the reach, power lashed down from an orbital and lit the kitchen in tones of blue. I could hear the maelstrom calling. "I said don't!" I closed my eyes, clawed the gun off the table.